Ladies and gentlemen, get the book Dr. Joshua Bowen wrote, The Atheist Handbook to the Old Testament. It is extremely full of knowledge and information for anyone, as well as join the Patreon. There's hundreds of videos that have not released to the internet. You can ask questions and I will record them with these scholars in high definition. I do that all the time. You can also personal message me and you help the community grow. Thanks a lot. Dr. Joshua Bowen. Once again, another patron, John. Super excited. Thank you for being a supporter, John, and everyone else. If I haven't mentioned this in the intro, thank you for being a patron. John asks, "Hi, Derek. Hope things are well with you. I have really been enjoying all of the posts of your recent trips, especially the clip with Dr. Bowen about slavery. Question about the book of Daniel. Have you ever heard of any documented Babylonian evidence that Nebuchadnezzar had a 7-year hiatus from ruling, then resumed as described in Daniel?"
No. Thank you for asking.
Well done. Great video. Thank you so much. Obviously, you know where this is coming from.
Yeah. So for people that may not know the background of that question. So, of course, in the book of Daniel, you have Nebuchadnezzar sort of set up in the story as this king who goes out and boasts about all the great things that he's done. And so God essentially strikes him down with this curse where he's going to go out and eat grass like an ox and become like an animal essentially for 7 years. And the way that the text talks about it, it's Nebuchadnezzar in the first person is saying, like in this proclamation to all the nations around, I was arrogant and I did this and the Most High God struck me and I became a wild man and blah, blah, blah. But now I repented and, praised the Most High of heaven and paraphrasing, but and now my sense returned to me and all this stuff. So do we have any evidence for that happening to Nebuchadnezzar? No. And we don't have all the, detailed records that we would like for the reign of Nebuchadnezzar during the Neo-Babylonian Empire, but we know a lot. And what's more than that is, this is why even apologists, or not apologists, but even evangelicals that hold to an early date for the book of Daniel will say that the evidence is with a 2nd century date, is what I'm getting ready to say. So, coming to that and trying to find something in Nebuchadnezzar's rule, something in his reign that matches some sort of a 7-year hiatus where he goes crazy is misguided. And the reason that it's misguided is we know who that text is actually about. So if you go to the Dead Sea Scrolls, you'll see this text called the Prayer of Nabonidus. And Nabonidus is sort of set, if you haven't read through my book, the section on the history of the ancient Near East, the Neo-Babylonian Empire starts under Nabopolassar, and he's the one that brings down the Neo-Syrian Empire in 612, 610. Then in 605, he dies and Nebuchadnezzar races back home from a military campaign after the Battle of Carchemish and takes the throne. So Nebuchadnezzar II is this major Neo-Babylonian king. And he's very well known for building projects and he's just very famous in the ancient world for the Neo-Babylonian Empire. Well, after him, you have some other Neo-Babylonian kings, including like Neriglissar and Marduk. And then you have Nabonidus. And Nabonidus is a king that does just some weird-ass shit. I mean, there's just not another way for me to say it. Even for like his time, it was weird. And what he does is when he comes to the throne, I think he rules for, I haven't looked at this one a little bit, but I think he rules for like 3 years, and then he leaves. He leaves Babylonia, and he goes to stay in the west in Taman, this oasis. And he's there for about 10 years, till his 13th regnal year. And he leaves his son, who shows up in the Hebrew Bible as Belshazzar, in charge of Babylonia, essentially, as a co-regent. So this isn't guesswork. It's not that we sort of know about it, or we have a lot of inscriptions, a lot of documentation, including like administrative texts that talk about this sort of thing. So we know Paul-Alain Bouyer went through in his book on Nabonidus, talking about all the different, like laying out the chronology of Nabonidus' reign. So we know a lot about his reign, and we know about this 10-year hiatus, and we know that it was seen as a little crazy, because a couple of things that, sort of stand out about it is Marduk is the main deity of Babylonia at this point, right? He's the one that's worshipped as the main god, the national deity, and because of that, worship of another deity, particularly above him, would have been really weird for the king, in particular. One of the things that so what he does, and again, Bouyer sort of walks through this in the textual evidence, is just for those at home, my 3-year-old has just decided to come downstairs and hang out with us when he should be sleeping. But we see that he starts to promote the moon god's scene, and in doing so, it really pisses off the Marduk priesthood. And when he leaves to go to Taman, I'm going somewhere with this in case the audience is sitting here listening, like, why are you droning on about the New Babylonian Empire?
I think it's valuable what you're talking about here.
Okay.
So please.
So when he's out for the 10 years and he leaves his son as co-regent, the king is required to participate in this New Year's festival. And the New Year's festival is centered on Marduk being like reaffirmed as the supreme deity. And so that text that we always talk about, the Enuma Elish, is this text about the ascendancy of Marduk over the other gods. It's recited at this New Year's festival. So again, you can see how it's all about Marduk and the king needs to participate. Well, from a ritual standpoint, if the king's not there, guess what you can't have? Can't have the New Year's festival because he's got to participate in it. So you're talking about 10 years where they can't celebrate the New Year's festival, and the Marduk priesthood is pissed off about this. So the Hebrew Bible presents Belshazzar as the son of Nebuchadnezzar. He's not the son of Nebuchadnezzar, he's the son of Nabonidus. And they place him as king over Babylonia. He's not king, he's co-regent. And the most important aspects, I'm blanking on the word here, but the things that the king does that are for him to do. Why can't I think of that word? Probably because my 3-year-old is sitting across me eating an apple. And you're doing a very good job keeping him quiet, by the way. Is that prerogatives? That's the word that I'm trying to think of. The prerogatives. The king, Nabonidus, maintains them for himself. And so he's okay. So this tradition, this memory of Nabonidus not only leaving for 10 years and going off, to this oasis of Taman, but also doing these crazy things, like worshiping sin above Marduk, was like, again, it's just seen as sort of crazy. And it's a madness that's sort of attributed to him, right? So in this prayer of Nabonidus text, sort of circling back, this prayer of Nabonidus text, it's Nabonidus who falls ill and kind of has this period of instability, and the language that you see in the prayer of Nabonidus actually is parallel, quite parallel, specifically parallel to what we see in the story about Nebuchadnezzar that's attributed to Nebuchadnezzar. So the long story short, what's happened is that there was the tradition about about Nabonidus and his time spent in Tema away, acting all weird. That tradition is maintained in the tradition of the Dead Sea Scrolls. You see it there. It connects. But in the biblical text, as in the book of Daniel, as often happens in Daniel, there's another tradition that's followed. And that tradition attributes it to Nebuchadnezzar. Now, Chunleong Seao, in his commentary on Daniel, has, I think, a really good observation that may actually be one of the reasons that it gets attributed there to Nebuchadnezzar instead of to Nabonidus, is that there's a connection that seems to be made between Nebuchadnezzar, who took the vessels from the temple when he conquered in 586, those sacred vessels that were in the temple, and brought them to Babylon. Belshazzar is the one who, in the story, profanes them by utilizing them. So the connection seems to be made between those two in that way. But this is why, the most simple and straightforward understanding of why Nebuchadnezzar would be called the father of Belshazzar as opposed to Nabonidus, who we know was his father, is not because there's some use here in Semitic of father meaning grandfather and son meaning grandson or whatever, and then we have to postulate that Nabonidus married a daughter of Nebuchadnezzar like Neriglissar did. Just leave all that aside. It's that Daniel attributes what is a tradition about Nebuchadnezzar, the memory about Nabonidus, to Nebuchadnezzar, which explains why he would call him his father, because it's attributing these characteristics of kind of going crazy, leaving, being gone for this period of time, to Nebuchadnezzar when it's clearly about Nabonidus.
And another thing you mentioned in your book, hint, get the book. Can you show that book real quick if you don't mind? I always love that cover too. For anyone who's interested, that is a must-get book right there. In your book here, right? No, but in the book, you mentioned something interesting that other scholars have pointed out as well. Within the prayer, if I'm not mistaken, it's this particular prayer. What happens is, it seems like it sounds almost Hebraic in a way too. So like, there would be no real Nebuchadnezzar saying a prayer like that.
Yeah. And there's so many things in it. I kind of do go through them in the book. There's so many things that don't make sense about Nebuchadnezzar saying what he's saying. Mm-hmm. For example, if you read through what Tremper Longman says about this, again, he's an evangelical that holds to an early date. The first question that comes up is, why don't we have any evidence about a 7-year hiatus? Why don't we have any evidence about him turning to the God of Israel? Why don't we have any evidence of that? And Tremper Longman's response is, well, twofold. One, we don't have all the documentation that we would like from the Neo-Babylonian period and from the time of Nebuchadnezzar, and that's true. We have a lot, though. And secondly, this might be something that would be seen like as an embarrassment to him, so he might not want it to go out. The problem is that the text it's all about a proclamation to all the people groups that are under his rule. Mm-hmm. And you would have to assume that this proclamation went out without any trail at all, and that immediately he changes his mind and says, nope, I no longer worship the God of Israel, which I think would be completely counter to the whole point of the story in the book of Daniel. Mm-hmm. And that is that a king who is antagonistic against the God of heaven undergoes, and is so haughty, undergoes this great transformation because God can change the heart of anyone. Mm-hmm. And it would have to be the most ephemeral change, because it happens and then it immediately changes, so it leaves no evidence. And this seems to be completely contrary to the point of the story in the book of Daniel.
Awesome. And so finally, if we will, I would like to have Oliver, who is your son and you are his father, to go ahead and get on camera, Oliver, so everybody can meet the real son. Don't worry, they can only see from here up.
Okay.
So there is the man with the plan right here.
Can you say Tang Gang?
Gang gang.
Can you say it without the apple in your mouth?
Gang gang.
That's
He's like, yeah, and puts it right back in his mouth. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Josh. I appreciate it. Oliver, thank you, Oliver, for being a good boy. The whole world sees it, and you're now famous.
Thumbs up.
Thumbs up. Yeah, now you're famous.
You're famous now, even though you're rubbing on the mic. It's okay. No worries. But yeah, there they are.